As business owners, entrepreneurs, family men, it's difficult for us to find the time to put together projects like these. Even though it's something we really want to do, unfortunately, taking care of the things we have to take care of comes first. However, because of viewer support for people like you, we're able to continue doing this. Please consider joining our Patreon and supporting the Burn and Return podcast. You're listening to Burn and Return, a weekly 1-hour podcast covering news from the agricultural and turfgrass industries.
Ladies, gentlemen, boys, girls, and those of you about to be, or maybe already have been, on the business end of a turkey's gizzard, it's time for Burn Return. Oh, yeah. Ooh. Sheila.
Yeah.
Sheila. Wow. Now, Ray's here with us. And, Ray, what does Sheila like to eat besides Ray for Thanksgiving?
Well, usually it is ribs.
Ooh.
Usually it's ribs.
Now,
I
gotta tell a funny story about ribs here with Ray. So, this is going back to Louisville here. Last month, and we go to this barbecue joint, and we go in, we order our food, and we, everybody eats, and it was good. It was solid, barbecue. It wasn't the best, but it was solid. And come out of there, and Ray's just kind of got this crummy look on his face, and I say, Ray, what happened? Was the ribs not good? And he was like, not so much that they weren't good. He said, when I order ribs, I expect a full rack, not this half rack shit. So, there was a little bit of an adjustment period for Ray coming over to the continental United States. We do things differently here, Ray. There is an obesity epidemic, except, when you have a strong back Hawaiian that comes over here that's used to carrying, 5 gallons at a time on a 88-pound sprayer, we're just not used to that over here. Everybody looks like me over here.
Yeah. We're not.
All right.
I mean,
it's all good. Listen, I think the most important thing is that we're here to give thanks, and we're thankful tonight because one of our good friends has stopped by to be our guest host tonight. Matt is still on the bench. He's coming back here, hopefully, sometime here early next month. It sounds like is what we're hearing, that his big stuff will be finished up. But tonight, we have with us Mr. Evie. Evie, how the hell are you?
I'm doing good.
He's doing good. He's traumatized from the pre-show. He's not saying much. There was a period there where you couldn't see if you weren't on video, but he was curled up in the fetal position and crying because of some of the things that were said. And it wasn't directed at him. It was just more of observations on life in general. And so if you want to learn more about that kind of stuff, about, the things that make us tick or the things that keep us from going crazy, as it would have, check us out, www.patreon.com/burn-return. Again, that's a place where you can go and see all of our behind-the-scenes content, our pre-shows, our after-shows. This particular show, we even take the time at the end to allow all those that are watching us live, and we'll usually have a couple, 2-3 dozen people that will watch us tape this live every Sunday night, and they'll be able to help us name these shows. So all the show titles that you see on your favorite podcast outlet, on the YouTubes, everything like that, we don't make any of that up. That's literally made up on the spot by our very, very loyal and dedicated viewers that join us for the live taping each night, just like they are tonight. So we'll see what they come up with. So if you don't like the show title, if you're triggered by it, whatever, you're just going to have to write to all of our patrons and bitch at them. Sorry. Now, with that being said, gentlemen, why don't we dive right into the headlines?
Fear here, this is just the news.
Gentlemen, right now the headlines are it's pretty interesting. These are kind of a riding the ray between burns and returns. And so first, let's talk about stakeholder groups calling on Congress to reaffirm pesticide preemption. So more than 300 stakeholder groups are calling on Congress to reaffirm pesticide pre-exemption on labeling and packaging. These groups warn that failing to do so would result in dangerous consequences for food security, the environment, public health, vital infrastructure, and other uses where pesticides provide important societal benefits. So basically here, gentlemen, what they're saying is FIFRA, the Federal Insecticide, Fungicide, and Rodenticide Act, which was passed back in the 30s originally, says that that's the law that governs all pesticides across the land federally. It says shall not impose or continue in effect any requirements for labeling or packaging in addition to or different from those as required by the federal government. So what's happening now, gentlemen, is that different states are kind of getting a little mixed up into saying, hey, we think it should look like this, on a label in terms of some of the language that's on there, some of the information that's on there. Yes, sir.
What I think actually is happening is not so much that, so much as certain states have taken it upon themselves to basically rewrite the labels for a specific purpose, normally to impose more stringent requirements / prohibitions / backdoor bans on specific products. I mean, that is the exact issue, and that is what a preemption is that it enjoins or prohibits a state from making their rules above and beyond what the EPA and FIFRA require. Because if left to their own devices, certain states that I will not name will see fit to do so, and therefore, cause issues with various industries such as agriculture and the turf, ornamental, and nursery market.
Yeah, and I think that a lot of folks don't understand, beyond just what we consider to be, typical pesticides, what that all covers, right? So there is a whole other Pandora's box that gets opened when you allow states to do that type of thing, right? Other products that we use in daily life, that are used in daily life around us, certainly I can see where it can be confusing and problematic. So I'm going to ask Evie, who works in, and we won't say what type of industry that he works in, but he does work in an industry that is fairly well regulated by the federal government. And so, Evie, let's just say that in your industry, right, that the states, all 50 states had the ability to just come in and say, hey, you know what? The way that you do things in Ohio versus Florida versus Tennessee are going to be a little bit different than what you might be used to. How badly would that, fuck shit up?
Definitely would. You would see. Well, I mean, you kind of already see it to an extent with taxes, but businesses move quickly, and you find the cheapest, least invasive path to go down where you can make the most profit. And so in terms of pesticides, I can easily see the companies, rather than trying to deal with this added regulation, they just decide, well, we're just not going to offer it in that state. And that just leaves the entire state and farmers and agriculture businesses just out of whatever it may be due to the added pressure.
Exactly. And I think that's where these stakeholders are going, Ray, is that they're saying, hey, our folks, farmers, turf managers, right, they need predictable access to these tools. So by preempting, right, and exactly what you're saying that, no state can make a law that supersedes federal law with respect to this particular act, right? So, I mean, how does this end up, do you think, between the tug of war here of maybe some more localized activists versus the federal government?
Okay, what that basically does is that basically limits their ability to drive businesses out of a state. Because, by the way, Ryan, I was telling everybody that kind of already happened in Hawaii when it was decided that there would be special requirements put upon users of restricted use pesticides, specifically any restricted use pesticide employed in the seed corn research and production fields here in Hawaii. I want to say former seed corn research and production fields, because all of those businesses basically left Hawaii. And that is because there were additional requirements placed upon these operators above and beyond what labeling required and above and beyond what was done in other states. And so these companies decided, okay, you don't want us here. Okay, we're leaving, we're going. And they took all of their money and all of their jobs with them.
And you just wonder, to Avi's point, right, of how quickly businesses move, because they're not sitting on the sidelines for this. They are not going to participate in a world, right, where there's uncertainty. There's no sense to do that. And so I think it'll be interesting to see, just how far down the wormhole we end up going here. Hopefully, though, Washington and the folks there, huge knock on wood, will prevail and say that, listen, we still need to have this preemption, and here's why. And I think it's a very, very good reason. Now, speaking of preemption or the lack thereof, let's jump over to Europe, where things are much, much more murky. And, ain't nobody stuffing the bird over there this week, guys. So here's the thing. We talked a little bit about this bill before that the EU, in their Agriculture and Health and Safety Commission, has put forth, right, that would fundamentally change the way that food production is viewed and actually completed there in Europe. And so EU countries are pushing back against the European Commission's plans to radically slash the use of pesticides in the bloc, arguing now is not the time to put food production in jeopardy. So it goes on to say here that the bill seeks to reshape food production in Europe and its environmental impact. But with rising food prices, fertilizer shortages in the wake of the war with Ukraine, coupled with farmers and chemical companies fearful of lower yields, the proposal was poorly received in the Council of the EU. So it's interesting. They go on to say here that essentially they're asking for more data, right? There's a certain segment of folks there within this particular body that's saying, hey, that's all well and good, but can you show us how that this is going to happen, right? And so far, there's not been a lot. This has been going on since June of this year, and quite honestly, they're looking at here. They're looking at ways that they can kind of backtrack, right? So, in a bid to placate the capitals before Wednesday's meeting, the commission shared a paper obtained by Politico, which was suggested open to climbing down on key areas of the bill months after refusing to budge. So basically, the people that wrote this bill, the people that are sort of trying to reshape things, are basically signaling here nearly 6 months into this that nothing's happened, nothing of any real progress, and now they're saying, hey, these might be the areas that we could, take some L's on, essentially, right? So instead of you could move away from a total ban of all pesticides into favoring pesticides that use low-risk ones while still allowing most pesticides to be used in ecologically sensitive areas and slimming down the total area of those protected zones to only the most relevant areas. So bottom line is this, is that they're getting pushback on the other side, right? The folks that want to reshape this, and there's really no level of what this is going to actually turn out to be, right? There's nobody that's saying, hey, it's going to either stay status quo or it's going to go this other way. But it really does seem like things are moving in the direction, right, where there's going to have to be a lot of compromise on the we'll call it the new way of thinking, right? The new school of thought there. So I guess the question here is, gentlemen, is what can we learn here on more of a localized scale, right? Because there's nothing like this yet. There was a bill that was put forth, I think, last year by Senator Cory Booker out of New Jersey, and it talked a lot about limiting pesticides, I think, around schools and public places and things like that, but not so much in agriculture. So if we get to the point that we've got to start considering, hey, what would we be willing to give up from our perspective? What would those things be? But also, what would be the things that you'd say, hey, absolutely not, the lines in the sand right here, and we're not giving up either this product, this practice, whatever it might be. And think about turf in particular, because we're low-hanging fruit, and they will come after us first. There's no question about it. So, Ray, what do you think?
Okay, what I think is, unfortunately, to many people, maintained turf grass is absolutely the enemy. But I can tell you here locally that a lot of the public spaces here in Hawaii are invaded by broadleaf weeds bearing thorns. And those thorns are a hazard to, kids, people, and even a dog walking, across the park. That is the effect of a pesticide prohibition or a reluctance to treat areas. Is how do you deal with issues relating to actual public health and safety in the face of a ban on uses on turf grass, especially uses on turf grass in public areas? Because my answer, if I were God, would be, you know what? We have this gnarly, thorny weed that is putting spikes into people's dogs and into their kids' feet. Let's spray it and get rid of it. Let's not have this because this is not healthy. And it's even more unhealthy than what is, the, how shall I say, the speculated harms that could be attributed to a pesticide application, because we're talking about thorns, for example, getting embedded in dogs, getting embedded in kids' feet, and then that causing infection, because you have a puncture wound in the skin. How is that healthy?
Well, and I think
we definitely
go ahead.
We definitely don't have to deal with anything like that up where I am, but I think in general, it's, I read in the article too that it's being too ambitious too quickly. And
there you go.
When you try to have these policy changes that move rapidly where practices cannot keep up to the point of sustaining what we're currently doing, that's when you're leaving a gap in the market and you see decline. And, exactly what they're trying to do with the EU, if they're moving too quickly, they realize that they're going to start seeing some problems arise, whether it be from food shortage or, crops or, wine in France, whatever it may be.
Yeah. And
there's not, I would say there's not any, go ahead, Ray.
And here's the other problem or the issue is that you have a shortage in Europe, of course, then essentially that burden or that problem gets transferred to the former colony countries that are in places like Africa or Asia.
Yep.
And I always talk about how the other issue becomes, okay, this crop or this product is not produced in the EU anymore because it's simply not economically viable, but now that production is exported to Africa or Asia, right? And Africa and Asia are not following the same, stringent prohibitions and bans. And so essentially, what have you done? And on a side note, I always give pause to the concept of saying, okay, we're going to ban this pesticide in this locality, because what typically happens is that then gets exported. And by the way, how would you feel about this particular pesticide going from a place where people can read, write, and understand labels to a place where you have somebody that cannot read or write or understand labels, and the guy is literally barefoot with a backpack sprayer leaking the stuff all over him? And that is this literal story or the truth about when these pesticides get exported to these other places outside of the EU and the United
Time's
States.
up. It's over.
And it will be
So,
time's up, and it's over for the poor guy that has all that shit leaking on him too.
Well, it's true, and we export a lot of our problems, and we import those from those places that it's not our problem, right? And that it's how much of that do you want to put up with? But also, Evie's got an absolute perfect spot on argument. Is that the thing that gets lost in all these situations? Whether we're talking about some of the articles that are coming up that are hyper local, right? Or that there are these issues that demand global attention, but they don't get it, right? Is that the velocity of change, right? I've used that term before, and it's so true in terms of a lot of great ideas, right? And well-meaning ideas, right? I think everybody wants the same thing. Hey, if we didn't have to use so much bad shit to get the job done, we wouldn't. I don't think there's anybody that's sitting here riding the coattails of the pesticide industry, laughing their way to the bank, at least here on the end user side, right? We get fucked by them just as hard as anybody else. But the problem here is that it is not an idea issue. It is an implementation issue. And until that we, as an industry can advocate for our positions, and until politicians can hear us loud and clear that, hey, listen, we're trying to be part of the solution. But when you take one hand, put it behind our back, and you tie a cinder block to our legs, and you throw us in the fucking river, there ain't gonna a whole lot of good that's going to happen from it, right? So let's work together on this and figure out better ways to get this stuff done. All right, with that, I'm going to take a look over here at Landscape Management, which is a trade publication here. It goes out to a lot of landscapers, LCOs, things like that. And I wanted to read this. I thought this was interesting. It talks about Rob Elder. Rob is from Omaha Organics. Omaha is also located in Nebraska, for those of you who don't have a map. And after having kids, Rob, the owner of Omaha Organics in Omaha, says he wanted to have a safe, sustainable, and beautiful lawn that his family and pets could enjoy, leading him to organic products. Elder is not alone. Many lawn care operators turn to biologicals and organics to improve soil structure and become more environmentally conscious. Omaha Organics provides organic lawn care, maintenance, fall and spring cleanups for clients that are 75% residential, 20% commercial, and 5% municipalities. The business also manufactures and sells its own organic fertilizer products. Elder says a standard recommended annual organic service consists of a soil test, 4 applications of organic fertilizer, a fall aeration with seeding. Depending on the needs of the lawn, technicians may use additional soil amendments like gypsum, phosphorus, lime, or top dressing. Raw materials and fertilizer applications contain 1 or more organic ingredients, including corn gluten meal, alfalfa, soy meal, kelp, molasses, and sulfate of potash. I'm sure that's organic, Rob. Omaha Organics also offers different types of soil amendments and pest control applications. Okay, we got that already. Biggest challenge that he has is concerns over cost. Organic products are typically more expensive, he says. So he goes on to talk about, organic lawn care is not a quick fix. It's not cheap. And they talk a couple other folks in this, right? And so, gentlemen, I've got to ask, in the face of, the current climate that we're in, right? As society and everything like that, clearly people are buying this. And I'm not saying that it's wrong to offer it. And I'm certainly not saying that people who buy it are dumb for doing so. I'm just wondering, how, how do you make this from a marketing standpoint, right? And do it without having to sell any bullshit. That's my question. Because I read just the primer on it, and I see bullshit in it. And that's my only question is like, how do you feel good about doing this? And you can be honest with people. Go ahead.
Here's the thing, Ryan, is I'm of the type where, hey, I don't do what I do to virtue signal. I do what I do because it works. No more, no less. Because in my industry, I see a lot of people virtue signaling, and their virtue signaling bites me in the ass, bites their customer in the ass, and surprise, surprise, thanks to their virtue signaling and fuckery, that becomes the lawn and the landscape that's now on hospice care because their virtue signaling screwed everything up. I mean,
Hospice Lawn Care
that's
has also
where
been registered as a Delaware LLC while everybody was away during the last taping. So I'm sorry, but we had to. Evie, listen, I know you see a lot of content and claims that are made. Let me ask you this, because I think you understand the science behind what these guys are trying to do, but I just think you also understand where the marketing goes. If I said, hey, listen, this is Shark Tank, and you've got to pitch me your organic lawn care program and maybe set a few expectations, what would the real story look like? Because I think you can thread the needle on this
one. I would say that it goes back to it's plants and turf are all natural beings, and once we're self-sustaining on their own. And so we're using the same types of materials that they may have gotten, in the past to sustain themselves, that we're using them going forward instead of manufactured products.
And I think that's the point, right? Is that we're providing the same building blocks, right? Essentially, of how plants are obtaining some of these nutrients and things like that. It's just a different mindset, right? So, like I said, I read some of those sometimes and get thrown off track when people start throwing around, like that sulfate of potash is an organic product.
It's definitely, like you said, it's definitely hard to make that without kind of spewing out some BS along the way as part of your sales tactics. Or,
Ryan,
at least having some key terms that definitely
or just
may or may not be true.
There you go. Or just saying, hey, listen, some of the stuff that we have to put on your lawn is so basic and fundamental that we don't have a good source, right, that we can use here in this location or whatever, and we have to use this that's, not necessarily natural or organic. So not shitting on them, just saying, like, be a little bit more honest in how you set those expectations. Go ahead, Ray.
Okay, Ryan, here's where I kind of bring it home to people is I break out a measuring cup. Usually it's like a 1 quart measuring cup, and I tell them this measuring cup can contain all the nitrogen your lawn and your landscape is going to need for the next month. Okay? And this nitrogen can easily be carried by me, and it only takes me to apply. But if you want to do it the other way and be quote unquote virtuous, you're going to need a crew of people and a much larger truck carrying tons and tons of organic matter to do the same thing. And I ask them, which process or method requires more fuel? Which process or method has more costs associated with it? Bottom line now, simple math, right?
Yeah.
Very simple math. And the other thing is that there's this one landscape that I'm dealing with right now where the previous practice was to absolutely strip away every single fallen leaf and grass clipping from that landscape.
Yeah.
I said, no more. Because I pointed something out to this person. I said, ever since that was no longer done on your landscape 4 months ago, you notice how your foliage plants are greening up and your plants look like they're alive again. And all of that is caused by, hey, letting nature do what it's doing in a sustainable cycle. A leaf falls to the ground, it decomposes, turns into mulch, and then returns the nutrients back to the soil, probably in the proportions that the plant wants in the first place. And, and this is what I'm about creating a sustainable paradigm for a lawn and a landscape where it's basically self-maintaining for the most part, because to me, the insanity is the person that wants every single leaf and grass clipping picked up. However, they then bring up, oh, now the soil is depleted. We need to put things back. And it's like, hey, hello, ma'am. You see that truck that hauling away all that shit? Well, guess what? That's organic matter that your lawn and your landscape could have used on its own if we crazy humans stayed out of the way and let it do it. So this is where, I have issues with the so-called, sustainable or quote unquote people selling organic things, because to me, being sustainable is not only about buying my shit or using this certain product because it's better than other. It's all about actually implementing practices that make sense. Now I'm off my soapbox.
Exactly,
I'm done.
Making my point though of with returning, the leaf clippings or the grass clippings, that's a natural way that it would break down in the past. And so that's kind of how you have to market, I feel like, organics. If you do, is that you want to continue those practices at the same way, but it's without getting too much into the BS of the sales. It just takes a little bit of education, which is essentially your sales pitch to them, that the synthetic stuff is, just as safe as the organics. You're not doing anything harmful to the thing, or if there are any, pesticides or fungicides, insecticides that you are using, that there is little or some risk involved, and whether they want that kind of risk associated with their property. But it's that education through your sales process where you explain to them that there is little risk.
There is minimal risk, and I kind of have to point out that what I tell people when they ask about the pesticides is I can look them straight in the eye and be super truthful with them and tell them that by year 2000, all of the products and practices of the greatest concern all got either restricted or banned. Because by year 2000, what happened, and I think I brought this up on the Discord, is the FQPA stepped in and got all of the most hazardous products off of the turf and ornamental and landscape market. Unfortunately, some of those products are still used on fruits and vegetables, but, as it relates to turf and ornamentals and what you're allowed to apply around a home, anything that's of concern to the FQPA, no more. And some of the reasons for taking those products away were because, yes, they were highly toxic. And yes, Evie, as you know, I'm of the age where I got to use a lot of those highly toxic products. I mean, it was not not funny. I mean,
I do not miss using them, so.
Yeah. You kind of know what I'm talking about because your father was in the nursery business, and unfortunately, that's where some of the craziest things were used in nurseries.
Man, don't you remember when lawn darts were labeled for large patch? God, that was a great time.
Yeah, or how about that gas-powered pogo stick where you push the button and that shit sends your fat butt going 20 feet up in the air. No promises on how you land, though, Ryan.
I'm pretty sure that was the adventure sports way of giving yourself a second. But in any regard, it is now time, gentlemen, for our favorite segment, and that one is known as Joe Knows Turf.
Joe!
Nose Turf! Hi, I'm
Joe!
I'm gonna give you a bunch of accurate turf facts today because
Joe!
Nose Turf.
Joe most certainly does know turf, and as a special tease for everybody here, not the week of Thanksgiving, but the following week. I know, is it the following week? Or maybe the week after?
following
JP?
week.
December 1st.
December 1st. December the 1st. Mark it on your calendars. Joe of Joe Knows Turf fame will be our special guest on Thursday. So please pull up a beverage. We'll try to do. I think we're gonna have Alan Hain and Dr. Phil on. We're gonna really try to bring the band back together, and hopefully Ray, myself, and Matt or whomever else is here with us will just be there for the healing process. We're hopefully that's all we can hope for. But with that being said, we're going to dive into tonight's video. Tonight's video was sent in by a loyal follower of the show, somebody who is a patron and adores our work deeply. I have not had the opportunity to watch this yet, and I don't know. Let me see how long this thing is here, J Pink, and we can dive right in. Go ahead and throw it up, and let's just see what we got here.
Hey guys, it's Russ, Lawn Journeys. It's time to get that last app down. This is a 2-for-1, don't go away.
Pause. All right, so the first thing I saw, Ray, this video is only 4 minutes and 42 seconds long. We'll watch it and pause as we go, but I'm no expert, but I'm pretty sure of two things. One, that is a fertilizer that is impregnated with prodiamine or dimension because of the yellow bag. I'm almost certain of that. And I am damn sure that the weight rating on that fucking trash can is less than 50 pounds because it's about to collapse and spill that bitch all over the grass.
Yeah,
so
that bag is
see
about
where
to
this
go
goes.
down.
Let's see.
Last
Ray,
app down. This is a 2-for-1, don't go away.
Feel that beat? Feel it?
Yeah.
Hey guys, welcome back to Lawn Journeys. It's Russ. It is November 12th. It's 70 degrees in Jersey. It's crazy. But it's time to get that last app down. What I'm going with this year is a 2-for-1. Now, you may have seen me do 2 product applications in years past. This year I'm knocking it out in 1 because I don't know if I'm a little lazy or I just want to leverage some of these great Anderson's products that's available out there. This particular fertilizer, which there are links below, you can check it out, is an Anderson's Barricade with fertilizer. Okay, so it's a pre-emergent weed control with the fertilizer application. This particular blend is 1804, so it's 18% nitrogen. It has 0 phos and 4% potassium. Barricade with fertilizer 1804 is Anderson's professional grade pre-emergent weed and feed. As I mentioned, it contains 0.426% of active ingredient, which is the prodiamine. All right, so I just wanted to review the application instructions here. This is the Anderson's Turf products with 0.426% Barricade herbicide, 1804. As you can see, it's a urea nitrogen fertilizer. The active ingredient is prodiamine. It goes under the trade name of Barricade by Anderson's. There is a mega list of weeds controlled. You can link to this product in the show notes and review the full list. Depending on your application rate, there are instructions here on the interval before you can do an overseed by applying this type of product. If I'm applying it today at a 4 pounds per 1,000 square feet, I'm looking at approximately 5 months of protection. As I mentioned earlier, there's a number of spreader settings for convenience here. All right, team, we're gonna load this product into the hopper. It's got that green prodiamine look. All right, so guys, as you can see, here's the product. Nicely granulated, ready to apply. This product can be used on established lawns and landscape beds to prevent over 30 grass and broadleaf weeds like poa annua, crabgrass, goosegrass, foxtail, lamb squatter, henbit, and more. Anderson's patented dispersible granule technology, which is the DJ, allows each granule to disperse into thousands of microparticles.
Pause. All right,
Pause.
pause. Okay, first, clearly he's reading off a card at this point. It's not good. I need to smoke a fucking cigarette after watching that.
There's a lot there.
All right.
There's a lot.
So this is Jono's. This is Jono's turf. And ladies and gentlemen, if you don't know what this is not making fun of somebody because they're a shill or something like that. Although the guy's got links below and he's reading off a cue card. That's fine. Like the guy's trying to make a living. It's a side hustle. Whatever. That part's irrelevant. The part that isn't irrelevant is that we are in New Jersey. There's not one leaf on any tree in this picture. Well, maybe whatever that little oak tree is in the back. And we're out there getting ready to apply Ray to cool season grass in November on the eastern seaboard, a pre-emergent herbicide. What in the fuck is going on here right now? I'm trying to make sense of this.
I'm trying to make sense of it myself, because if this guy is in Jersey, I gotta ask, come December 10th or December 15th, what exactly would be germinating or emerging in a lawn at that time that you need to control with a pre-emergent? Like, I can see using something like prodiamine or something a little stronger where I'm at. I can see doing that, say, in the southeastern United States, because they have POA and other winter annual weeds coming up from seed in what's supposed to be dormant Bermuda. However, I cannot see the rationale for throwing down the full rate of prodiamine in the winter in Jersey. And I kind of want to ask, Joe the Lawn Warrior, if in his experience an application like that is even necessary, because after all, Joe is from Jersey, right? So I got to ask him.
Joe is from Jersey.
See what he thinks. I mean, because this just doesn't make sense to me. And that's even though I have no experience with weeds in New Jersey, but logically to me, it just is not making any sense. I mean, my mind is blown right now.
Now, Evie, let me ask you this question. Is of the major weeds controlled preventatively by prodiamine, right? Which of those weeds is going to be germinating in, say, the next, I don't know. Hell, I'll even give him the 5 months. I'll say just 90 days. Any of them?
Henbit, maybe. POA, maybe. I mean,
and then it's going to snow and freeze. And then it's going to snow and freeze, and the weeds are going to die, so it won't matter.
Yeah, not the next 90 days. Yeah. Not until it's late February, March for them, I'm sure.
Right. And so I don't know if this gentleman has conflated what he's seen with folks that are further south, as Ray's alluded to, or if this is just a money grab. I'm not sure what the motives are, but I'd sure like to know why or whom suggested that in cool season grass to make this type of application. Now, if you are so inclined as to do something like this, there's a couple things you should know. One, you should be doing this way earlier, right? Typically we see POA start to germinate when we get soil temperatures down closer to the 50s, and that's only on the annual types, right? So a lot of the POA that we see on our lawns is actually a perennial type, even though it's called POA annua. It's variety reptans, which makes it a perennial plant. It never really goes away. It just kind of withers and looks like shit in the summertime when it gets real hot, and it bounces right back up like a prize fighter on an 8 count, and then it hits you in the face again the next year. So, that all being said, there's really no benefit here on the POA side, especially at this juncture. So, let's just see how this all plays out the last 2 minutes or so of this video. And
allows each granule to disperse into thousands of microparticles, which provides better coverage and contact with your turf. Applying at 4 pounds per 1,000, I'm getting
Okay, he's clearly reading off a card there because we don't care about contact with the turf with the DG. The DG is a fantastic formulation. Literally the market leader, the best thing that you can get right now if you are applying, any product like this or, any fertilizer, really. Best thing out there, bar none. That all being said, we're not looking for contact with the plant because there's absolutely nothing that it will do because we need to provide or get that active ingredient down in the soil so it can provide a vapor barrier for seeds to not germinate, even though they won't because the soil temperatures are going to be below 40 degrees, probably below 20 degrees here pretty soon, and there'll be nothing growing actively. So that's, the irrelevant point here, but let's go ahead and see what else he says.
5 months of protection, that'll take me to mid-April. So if I do my next pre-emergent application in March, there's going to be a little bit of an overlap and I'm good to go into full crabgrass germination, okay? So pay attention to those instructions on the bag if you're using this product at a different time of the year, say the spring, okay? Applying at 4 pounds per 1,000. If I put this down in the spring, I wouldn't be able to do an overseed until at least July. Most people don't overseed in July, but you need to look at the instructions on the bag, follow the instructions because there is a residual of prodiamine that will stay in the ground, creating that vapor barrier, which will stop germination once it starts. So, you're shutting things down. So if you have any plans to do a spring seeding for some reason, if you apply this material now, you're probably not going to want to seed until sometime in April. And that may be okay with you, but it's just something to be cognizant of. All right, team, so that covers a 2-for-1 winterization, which is a fertilization with pre-emergent weed control. I wish you guys a happy holiday season. Thanksgiving is almost upon us. Get out there, get it done. Make sure you put your turf to sleep in a healthy and responsible manner.
Fuck! Okay.
What?
Right, that was just a visceral reaction. I'm sorry. I swear to God that I didn't know. Okay. In a healthy and responsible manner. Listen, this guy, I'd probably sit down and have a beer with him. I don't want him to think that we're picking on him. It's just, dude, you put out some stuff that's beyond questionable and bordering on suspect in the way that it is presented. So here's what I want folks to know, right, from our panel to the rest of the world, is that please don't feel inclined that you need to put a pre-emergent herbicide out on your cool season turf anything past, I'm going to say like September. And that's really pushing it if you're in a POA window that you would get, soil temperatures down into the 50s consistently in that time of year. You're going to be somewhere in the bottom end of the transition zone, right, growing cool season grass. Even then, I question the timing and the nature of that application.
Uh-oh. We just lost DeMay mid-sentence.
Lost him right in the middle.
Throwing down 0.8 of a pound. Oh, man.
Audio's
throwing
back, but
down
no video.
0.8 of a pound of nitrogen. What the hell is happening? Hang on.
Yeah, 0.8 of a pound of nitrogen at a time when it's obvious to me that the leaves have already come off the trees, and I'm imagining that his grass is not even actively growing. So I'm trying to figure out what would be needed. And, Ryan and Evie, I had a weird question because you're obviously way more up north than I am. But what do you think would happen to prodiamine put down on soil that's about to be frozen? I cannot imagine good things happening of that. And, he's painting a happy picture of 5 months of, pre-emergent coverage where I'm under the idea that once the ground freezes, the clock stops on the degradation or the breakdown of that prodiamine, and it'll just suspend and wake back up next spring when it does warm up, and then he's going to probably stack more pre-emergent on that application. And all I got to think now is, when you start doing that, oh my, poor grass. Because we all know how herbicides like prodiamine work, right? Is it works by inhibiting roots. That's how come it's very good on crabgrass. That's how come it's pretty good on Poa annua, is that it keeps the roots of those grassy weeds from, germinating from seed and developing. But that root inhibition effect also applies to your desirable lawn.
Bingo. That was the last point I was just about to make, is that what happens, right, when we get into these altered states of reality, especially in New Jersey, right, where we have, longer periods of thaw and or high temperatures that begin to wake the grass up and stimulate not only top growth but root development. And now we're in a situation where we've got pre-emergent there. And guess what, folks? Guess what? Prodiamine doesn't give a shit whether you're a desirable turfgrass root or you are the enemy in some type of weed root, right? And I'm not saying that it's going to kill your existing grass, but it will absolutely have an effect, okay? So all that being said, it's 37 degrees soil temperature right now. We our show producer extraordinaire has looked this up and provided this information in my earpiece, and it wasn't like I was, let me do it another way. I'm getting a note here that says Anderson's DG fertilizer spreads on contact the best that ever was, except for when it's 37 fucking degrees in the soil at a 2-inch depth.
Yeah, I mean, and you see, I'm just kind of wondering, what is the merit or the utility of an application like that when it's getting cool, it's about to snow, and basically both weeds and grass have basically gone to sleep for the season. It's like, what is the purpose of this all? And my last issue is, isn't it kind of late in the year to be putting down nitrogen?
That was the point as I was cut off there. That's something that I was trying to make, is that 0.8 of a pound is a lot in this particular case to go ahead and do. And based on what I'm seeing here, that really, it's got a nitrogenase inhibitor, right? So it's what is it, 4.5 of 18%? So under 30%, 25%. What is that? 4.5 divided by 18. It is 25% slow release nitrogen. Just with, it's not a good situation. All right, we got to move on. But listen, guy, you're probably watching this. You took everything to heart, took it all personally. Don't, just do a little bit of research first. Seriously, I call Anderson's and say, hey, is this a good idea to put down? Guarantee if you had talked to one of their agronomists, they would have said, probably not. Maybe let's put you into this situation here if you're in New Jersey. So use your resources, use your network. If it's as limited as Anderson's, well, that's not even so bad. But broaden your horizons, and hopefully you can put your lawn to bed responsibly next year. Try again. All right. Now, moving on. Listen, Ray, if there's anything that's going to make Sheila scream more than getting her bird stuffed this weekend, it's bound to be our burns. Ray, I'm told that you're the only one that can answer this because the only one that's been inside. But I heard that Sheila has a really good recipe for giblet gravy. Is that true?
True. Extremely true.
Yep. Yep. I've heard when you add lipstick to it, it tastes even better. Our first burn here tonight is coming to us here from Manteca, California. And, boys, they're going through a tough time there in Manteca, city of 90,000 people. And they've got the animal shelter there at the corner of Wetmore and South Main Street, and they have not been able to mow the grass in months. So much so that the volunteers that work there at the shelter have taken to mowing the grass themselves with their own mowers that they bring in from home. So the mayor got a little pissed off and says, "Hey, as a community of 90,000 people, we should be able to afford a lawnmower." He said during the council meeting, "We should not have to depend on volunteers to maintain city property." His comments were made after several people spoke up as part of a group of community volunteers helping at the shelter, but trying to shed some light on the shortcomings in a bid to have the city take corrective measures. The lack of a lawnmower that council was made aware of several months ago when others spoke about the animal shelter needs prompted a formal presentation on the condition of the facility's shelter policies at a council meeting last month says that progress is being made to get turf in place that would be more weeds than grass. I think they screwed that line up, but whatever. They also noted that it's got several gopher holes as well as posing a safety issue for the dogs and humans. All right, staff indicated specifications are being made for a contractor to do the turf work. As for the lawnmower, it was indicated that the division that maintains the landscaping at city facilities hasn't had a small mower to do such a job for a number of years. All right. There's a lot going on, okay? Number one. Okay, this is what happens when you don't maintain turf, right? We get gopher holes, we get vertebrate pests, right, Ray? We get invertebrate pests, we get a lot of different things. So,
what's going on there?
For everybody clamoring and saying that, hey, this, we can just let this stuff go. It could be native. It could be great.
It can be natural.
I hope you understand. It can be natural. I hope that you understand what you're getting into. And that, listen, I don't mind a gopher or two. I don't mind some insects. If you're into, if you have a tick fetish, having tweezers on your skin, this might be for you.
Or maybe you all like fire ants. Maybe you all like fire ants. I don't know, because true story is that literally as an initiation into adulthood, I heard that a certain tribe in South America makes this gigantic stinging ant bite boys as part of an initiation.
What?
Yeah.
Ray, what kind of Discovery Channel shit are you watching?
All kinds of scary, horrific stuff where I don't know. I mean, it's sometimes reality is a lot more scary and gruesome than fantasy. I mean, because it's literally it's a tribe in South America that's what they do to their teenage boys, is they subject them to ant bites. And these ants are called bullet ants. And the reason why they're called bullet ants is because the bite is so painful that it's almost like getting shot with a gun.
The things you learn from Ray are always the most uplifting and inspiring, I should say. If there's still demotivational posters that were a thing, I think Ray could be our next author. Evie, here's a question I've got to ask you, because as the new proud owner of a Ego walk behind electric mower, battery powered mower, how in the fuck does a city of 90,000 people not be able to go down to Home Depot for what, $300, $400, $500? I don't know what it costs, right? And
requisition one.
I would assume that these folks could take care of a small lawn with that mower. I mean, can you speak to its reliability, dependability? Because even this is California, gas-powered equipment's going away. So just being a little bit more forward-thinking, what would it take for the bureaucracy to step aside for a moment and come to their senses on a mower for a small space?
I mean, you could even go one step further if you wanted, and you could go completely green and use a push manual reel mower. I mean, that's what I've been doing for the past year, and that works out great. I mean, just a little bit of exercise, but that's the most sustainable. Zero gas, zero emissions. All you need to do is the emissions to pick it up and get it to the place and set for the entire time. But for even an electric, I've been blown away by just how well they've performed, especially in small spaces, and they're lighter than like just a regular engine push mower. So the maneuverability for a volunteer that's working in an animal shelter would be much easier than any sort of commercial unit that they're trying to get.
And that's what I'm saying. Is as a volunteer or city workers, it's you show up. I'm gonna see how big this lawn is. While you guys are talking, I've got to know just how lazy. And listen, I used to be a city worker, so I can speak on this. Okay,
or more like how
bullshit excuse. Oh, we don't have a mower small enough for that. We're not doing it.
Or for a municipality so disorganized and so not have its shit together, right? To where you can't, come together for, like I said, like you say, one of those Eagle, mowers. I mean, because I've seen an Eagle mower, and my goodness, those would be perfect for a tiny little space, in front of a building. I mean, it would just knock that out in about a half an hour or less. I mean, what's the problem here, folks? Or is it a case of red tape entangling everything such that nothing gets done?
I think it's probably some of that. And quite honestly, like that whole excuse, like I was saying, that well, listen, that's the old Telly Coleman excuse, right? Like, I don't have one small enough, so I can't go in there, right? And really, Telly's not even allowed to go into Home Depot anymore. The last time he went in there, he was wearing shorts, and somebody mistook him for a stick of drain pipe that was on sale, and they kicked him out.
Uh-oh.
So he's not even allowed to go back in there. Yeah, it's a sad story. But no, this lawn here looks to be just the back. Oh, look at this. Jay Pink's already on it. I'm doing a little Google Earth through here real quick. Polygon. Let me do this real quick. This can't be more than 3,000 square feet.
I will say too, imagine, the article says it's the mayor that is coming up and saying, why can't we afford a mower for this place? How crappy that must be for the city that you have the mayor that's the one coming down with the hammer being like, we can't mow our lawns. I mean, that's going to your CEO and coming down on you as a little city employee. Really
that
coming
was,
down on you.
He didn't plan on those people showing up at the city council meeting, and when it did, he was not afraid to throw all y'all motherfuckers under the bus. That's what happened.
Yeah, and that's because
I bet you they had a mower the next day.
I hope so, because like you all say, that could be done with one of those Eagle mowers rather easily, because what is that? Like Ryan said, less than 3,000 square feet, and your lawn at home is about 3,000 or so too, or a little bit over that, right, Evie?
Yeah, my backyard.
It does just fine, right? It makes it, it makes it through the entire backyard. So I'm not seeing a good reason or excuse. I mean, to me, this just sounds like bureaucracy tripping on itself.
Somebody that doesn't want to get off the mower. Somebody doesn't want to get off the zero turn and push mow. That's what this is. That's how this all started. Somebody started taking care of it and said, I'm serious. That's exactly the way this started. And then somebody said, we'll take care of it. And then they started doing it. And then the city workers drive past every day and they're like, look at that. They're mowing it for us, those suckers. And then the mayor got involved.
Ryan, for shame, because do you know that I mow approximately an acre of grass per week on foot? You know that I do that just about every week, about an acre of grass.
Yeah, and you're well suited to it. But I'm saying that these guys are not, most likely.
Wimp, weak, man,
weak for sure. Now let's talk about something else that's weak here. We're jumping over here to Rockport, Maine, as a matter of fact. Very famous. They've got brand of shoes and some other gear that they sell that's branded as Rockport. But So no, they're trying to determine if grass can be replaced with more benign flora, and start there at the Rockport town offices. And of course, a little kitschy intro here. No, this is not about cannabis dispensaries. It's common lawn grass whose existence so irks a select board member that he wants only fescue-free flora on town property. Excuse me. And while Eric Bousquet has suggested small-scale trials at first to explore alternatives, if his colleagues embrace his ideas, it could mean the eradication over time of all grasses from parks, cemeteries, roadsides, and all town landscaping. That was the gist at the board's November 14th meeting. It saw Bousquet take the lead, leading a litany of problems with lawn grass. Excuse me again. They range rapidly from escalating mowing fees to hazards posed by pesticides and pollution from lawnmowers. The select board took no action on the future of Rockport, nor was the potentially explosive issue of regulating private lawns discussed. The comments of those who participated in the agendized discussion suggest there could be ample official support to begin limited testing of alternatives to grass. Quoting Bousquet, "I just don't like grass." In response to which alternative he does prefer, is growing moss on part of his lawn and has said it only has to be cut once a year. Who cuts moss? I'm talking about replacing all the grass tomorrow. I'm talking about in segments. I want to see if we can try something. A section of the town office space. Some graveyard spaces. The graveyard mowing at Seaview Cemetery is crazy. I mean, what did we spend? $30,000 to mow a graveyard? That's a lot of money for mowing. Town manager John Duke noted the figure as $40,000. He described the mowing cost as tremendous. The current 3-year contract being twice the cost as the prior agreement. Invited to participate in the session, Douglas Cole, it's blah, 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 blah. They talked about a pilot program in a neighboring town of Rockland. Let's see here. Says she completed, this is who's this person? Megan Dwyer of the Conservation Committee said that she completed the UMaine Cooperative Extension Service and is also a master gardener. They go on to say, hey, listen, there's a outright elimination of grass in all places doesn't necessarily make sense. That's sort of what the gist of it ended up being. We're not quite ready for this, but gentlemen, how is it that a town here, let me Rockport, town of 3,400 people, right? Could just say, hey, we're not going to have grass anymore in any of our public spaces. Is that really practical, or am I missing something here?
I don't think that's practical at all. I mean, think of the sports that your kids are playing. So are you going to do some alternative on the baseball fields for the outfield? So that they're going to be out there playing on clover or whatever. How's that going to, change up the cleats and all of a sudden the kid gets stuck or something like that versus how the ball rolls, or just your park spaces around the parks that your kids play at. It just doesn't make sense to completely eradicate it. I get, it's a good thought, I think, that you're looking for alternatives that use less water or less inputs, both from, water or fertilizer demand, but also people demand of cutting it constantly. But it also has value to it. The point, big point of grass is just the value of the appearance. And, if you remove that, I think of like the gravestones, that if you remove it from the cemetery, it's sort of paying respect to all the people that have rested there. And you want it nice and upkept, and removing it, replacing with something else kind of seems a bit disrespectful to all the people that lay rest there. But I do understand using maybe less sustainable ground covers in certain areas, but you can only do that to a certain extent. There's going to be spots that are out in the sun that require to have grass, either to be maintained or for, your kids to be playing on.
Yeah. Yeah, that's a good point, because to me, I'm always the strongest advocate for grass, but in areas where it serves a purpose and it is practical to maintain it. Whereas I say that on roadside type areas and areas that are just supposed to have ground cover, but they don't necessarily serve like another human function, like for example, kids are not playing on it, is sure. I'm in favor of a ground cover that requires less upkeep and less maintenance. And here's the thing about moss. Moss only grows in wet and shady areas. It does not grow so much in areas that are more sunny, right? So it would be hard to get grass to grow in all areas, because I suspect that this Mr. Bousquet has a yard that is covered over by trees. So moss is the only thing that can grow for him. I mean, I get it. But then the rest of the municipal grounds, I'm pretty sure, are not like that. So I'm just not imagining. And here's my other question, too, about alternative ground covers. I have two questions about them. Number one is, how feasible or practical is it to keep a stand of that ground cover free of invasive weeds? That's the first question. Second question, for ground covers that are used in more public areas that are, trafficked by children, is this particular ground cover or plant material extremely attractive to bees? And the reason why I ask that is because for some people, a bee sting is no big deal. For other people, a bee sting means a jab with an EpiPen and then a ride in the ambulance. That's something that I think about as well when people talk about alternative ground covers, because as far as I know, a maintained stand of grass will not have bees necessarily visiting, that area. They'll be off in the shrubbery and, in the flowers, and not necessarily in the lawn where the people are.
Here's my question. How do we not blend some of the elements from our last story, right, with this one? How is it not being explored to keep the grass for the points that Evie makes? I 100% agree with those, that it would be kind of reprehensible for a lot of different reasons to just remove grass because we don't like grass, right? There's lots of things, right, in town or in the cities that we live in that we don't like, that are manifestations of life as we know it, and we just need to get better at maintaining them. And so in this case, my question, gentlemen, is, does this cemetery that was being mowed for $40,000 just not seem to be a perfect candidate for a robotic mower?
Hey, I mean, that's not a bad idea. I mean, and all that would mean is just keep the batteries charged on that mower and the little razor blades underneath the mower replaced on a regular basis. And that would be, hey, you know what? We got to get our resident rocket scientist on that.
We will, and we'll see if maybe Mr. Bousquet can ask Santa for a robot mower for Christmas. We'll see how that goes. All right.
Well,
and
I will say, on top of just a robot mower, that a lot of what we get excited about is the new and upcoming cultivars of grass, and so many of them are less inputs, more sustainable, more drought tolerant, everything that you want that requires less actual input from the people. So if an issue is that, they're having to cut this grass, so many times, well, then you can cut back on the fertilizer, or You can go something to like the fine fescues that doesn't require as much nitrogen, doesn't grow as fast.
EV?
And so you can look at, I think even just looking at newer cultivars and newer varieties is equally, or that's achieving the same kind of outcome that they're looking for by looking at ground covers such as moss.
That's a great.
Hey,
Look at that.
that's a
why he's on
great
the panel,
point.
ladies and gentlemen.
No, that's a great point because let me tell you something. I am jealous, literally jealous of people that can grow things like fine fescue. Okay? And the reason why I'm jealous is because that is a true low input, don't touch me and let me be kind of grass. Because I think I've talked with other people growing fine fescue, like Gravy Lookout, and his experience with fine fescue is that the less you apply to it and the less you do to it, the better it is. If, maintenance and inputs are an issue, I mean, the less you do to it, the better it looks, the better it performs, versus I get it when a grass turns into a huge suck of mowing, fertilizers, chemicals, products, etc. I mean, I get that, that's, and, I got to tell you that in most cases, when a grass or a turf area starts to become that, even I question, was this variety of grass a good choice for the situation? Was this a good idea? Or are we going to turn this into another, it's here, we can't afford to change to something that's more practical, and so now this turf area is on hospice lawn care.
And I
just
think
to
that's
keep
the
it
thing.
alive.
This would be, my challenge would be, who gets to decide, right? Who's going to inform the select board and city manager, the mayor, whoever, right? Who's going to be those voices in the room, right? To say, hey, this is what we should try and trial, of different species, different types of plants, things like that, right? Or different maintenance strategies, or a combination of all those things. I think a lot of times, and from my view, right, my point of view, I see this a lot where folks rely simply on Google. I mean, literally, people who are elected to come up with the best ideas for their village, their town, their county, their state, whatever the whatever the parcel might be, and that's the best they can do. And I think this is a great opportunity for hopefully industry in that state to reach out. And so I'm going to make mention of it to some folks I know up there, and we'll see if they can do it and maybe help them out. And again, this isn't saying that they want to bathe this stuff in pesticides and all this and that. It's quite another thing. It's saying, hey, listen, we want to be part of the solution. We think that grass can be a part of that, right? Just in a little bit different way than what you might think, right, about grass and all those preconceptions you might have about it. So, for now, Mr. Bousquet, maybe you should visit the cannabis dispensary. I think your glaucoma is active. All right, we're going to move on right now over to the returns because, hey, anything that ends on cannabis is a return. So, let's go to those returns.
I'm back.
All right, gentlemen. First up, out of Golf Course Management Online, the trade publication of the Golf Course Superintendents Association of America. We're talking here about soil moisture sensor technologies compared to traditional ET-based irrigation practices and what they found. So read this a little summary here that they go through. And starting off here, golf courses spread across the southwestern United States continue to be significantly impacted by extreme and persistent droughts. Many state and local governments have recently implemented sweeping emergency ordinances that significantly limit or prohibit the use of irrigation water for various turf areas in residential and commercial landscapes alike. Restrictive legislation aimed at reducing water usage is nothing new to superintendents and turfgrass managers in the Southwest. Persistent drought, however, combined with warming temperatures and reduced availability of water across the region, has brought increasingly difficult challenges for many golf facilities, and fears of more intense water restrictions are a reality many may soon face. While turf reduction projects in, out of bounds, and rough areas of the golf course have dramatically reduced water consumption and have been shown to be one of the more effective solutions to reducing water use, more focus can be made on large playable areas of the golf course, like fairways, which make up roughly 30% of the total maintained turf areas of an average-sized golf course. So they go on to talk here about soil moisture sensors, right? In-ground soil moisture sensors, and also ones that can be used above the surface and pushed in and checking spots, right? And also talking a little bit about ET rates and how those might be used, right? So traditionally, if you want to think of it like this, we've talked a little bit on this show and others about evapotranspiration, and essentially that is, right, the amount of water that's lost through the soil and the evaporative heating, right, that occurs throughout the day, and then also the transpiration, which is basically how the plant sweats and cools itself by expelling water in the form of carbon dioxide, right? So you take those two together, and we can reasonably estimate how much water is lost from a turfgrass system on a day-to-day basis, and that number is expressed in inches, right? Seemingly just like we get, say somebody will say, oh, we got a 1/4 inch of rain last night. Well, we can say with ET, hey, we lost a 1/4 of an inch of water today based on evapotranspiration rates. And we're able to figure this out by kind of combining a few different factors. One is the solar radiation, or the energy that the sun is putting out. So a brighter, sunnier day in June, let's say, as of October, where the sun's a little bit closer towards the northern hemisphere, might elicit, more of a response in that category there in the summer. Also, too, we look at wind, right, which will dry soils out, dry out plants. Also, temperature, right, always a function. And finally, those three things. So we look at those three things as our ET model, right? And from there, we're able to then deduct and figure out what we have. So basically, what this study is saying is that there's a different way of doing this. We've got these soil moisture meters that we can dive into and look at individual areas, and not just necessarily say, well, the entire fairways, all of them lost the same amount each day. So as they did this, they did this research here at Cal Poly Pomona in Southern California, looking at fall of 2018 through the spring of 2020. Now, they didn't look at anything during the winter dormancy season, as this is on warm season grass, right? So there's no real reason to look at how much water are we gaining or losing when we're in essentially a dormant situation, right? So for the purpose of this study, they looked at fairway type conditions. So they're mowing a little bit lower, maybe not Ray low, right? But they they looked at a few of these things. And so we look at the study here, and JP, if you want to go to that graph, that bar graph right there, perfect. So here's what we're seeing is we've got a couple of soil moisture sensors here, the Toro, the Rainbird, and also the Tucor, which is another brand that's coming to the marketplace here as of late. So looking at all these here, gentlemen, and look at the differences in water consumption when we look at specifically ET, right? So the blue line showing much, much, much greater water usage. So when we're estimating, again, we're estimating ET, even if we have a weather station on the property, and even if we're just saying, hey, here's what we think it is, what we find is that there are, microclimates within the golf course. We understand that there's differences in soil composition, soil physics, right, that exist within the property. And so here we are showing that in some of the toughest conditions, especially look at that summertime, right? Even with the worst. Go ahead.
Ryan, I got to kind of look at this, and, this corroborates with actually how I manage water, especially in the summertime, in that, do you know where I take my ET to typically? I take my ET down to about 50%. I'm not at 100% replacement every week. I typically take it down to about 50%. And by doing that, I save a lot of water, and I also mitigate another issue, which is excessive surge growth. And it sounds like on the golf courses, if you go by ET, sounds to me like you're kind of overwatering. That's what it looks like. Because here's the thing is that...
Go ahead.
Because it looks to me like you put in one of those moisture sensors and you can keep the grass alive with about half the water that you would be putting down if you were to observe replacement via ET.
And the funny thing is too is that the way that they ran the ET irrigation, it was only 3 days a week they were running it, so they were basically taking it from the previous 2 or 3 days, and then only running that irrigation essentially like I was thinking it was like Monday, Wednesday, Friday, or Monday, Wednesday, Sunday, something like that. And so again, the replacement of that ET just sends things into a tailspin when we look at water usage. Because again, if we're just going back and looking at water consumption, right? Even in the summer of 2019, the peak of this study in terms of water usage, right? The worst performing, I don't even know if you want to call it worst performing, the sensor that put us at the highest water usage, right, for these plots was the 2-core at 2,000 gallons, right? Above that, right, was the ET-based model, right, where we're irrigating 3 days a week, and we surpassed that by over 33%, closer to 40% in real terms, right? More irrigation with ET than our highest grossing sensor technology. Now, the other two were far less than that, almost 50%, actually more than 50% less than the ET in the summer of 2019. So it's really, really crazy to me that we have this technology that's there, yet we're not using it. We're still using ET, and I think ET is an important number to know and to understand, right, from a management perspective. We know that we have a lot of good data out there that suggests that we can manage, manage irrigation based on ET down as low as in some cases 50-60%, even on cool season grasses, right? But my question to you, gentlemen, is what would be the barrier? Take cost out for a second, because the cost really isn't as bad as people think, but what would be the barriers to lawn care folks, DIY, and professional lawn care folks from adopting this type of a setup for not only programming irrigation, but forecasting irrigation needs, week over week, month over month?
Right. I can think of one where do you know why I'm fond of bulldozers? It is because
the bodies.
No, not to hide the bodies, but because my enemy when trying to manage water is layering of different materials in the soil profile and soil itself. That is like not my friend. And hence the bulldozer, because if I were God, most of the places I deal with would get scraped out and all the existing soil replaced with about 2 feet of sand. And that way I have a uniform profile that then becomes extremely predictable.
Well, and I think that's the other thing too, is that soil, we're talking about soil physical characteristics, right, as it relates to water management, but you still have to have a way to estimate and figure out, okay, hey, I know reasonably how that will, perform in this, but that's on a macro scale. It's not down to the micro level to say, hey, Mrs. Jones has that same soil that Mrs. Smith has, and it takes a little bit more to get Mrs. Jones wet than it does to get Mrs. Smith wet. That's not a function of age either.
Yeah, and Tully just brought up an important point too, because I find out something about people's irrigation system when I take them down to 50% ET. And what I find out is their irrigation coverage stinks. Because usually what happens...
Time's up, it's over.
This is where I take issue, is that a mediocre, half-ass, chuck-in-a-truck irrigation system will perform and keep the grass green if you're constantly overwatering. But once you take it down to like even 75 or 80% ET, any deficiencies or excesses in coverage flash like a neon sign on the Vegas Strip. Okay,
So,
it
I'm gonna
shows.
Oh, I believe it. So, Evie, I was going to ask you from a cool season perspective, right? This is an article all about warm season, but I believe many of these things would be apparent within warm season as well. My question to you is, take the sensor technology out for a second and just talk about, from a proper water management standpoint, how much easier does that make growing cool season grass, especially when it's rough outside, in terms of, the weather's unpredictable or it could be tough, right, for growing cool season grasses. Does that make the biggest difference, or is there something I'm missing as far as one facet of management that you have to get right? If you
It's for the average homeowner, I would say it's definitely has to be one, if not the biggest thing that they could, if it was out of their control and just set up
Yep.
automatically, that would be one of the biggest things to make, almost all the yards in the neighborhood look about equal. And I think you were asking about the barriers of entry here.
Sure.
I think one of them would possibly be the installation. A lot of there's obviously issues that Ray brought up of irrigations may not be covering all the areas correctly, but
Mhm.
when they're installing the irrigation, or nowadays they almost always do it, well, they'll do a rain sensor. And
Mhm.
a lot of times the installers will set up, they'll just set up a schedule for you to start off, and maybe they're targeting to get 1.5 inches per week. And you always talk about the good, better, best, and I always think if that's,
Sure.
you're just targeting 1 to 1.5 inches, that's might be okay. That's good. ET is probably better, where you're at least have a better knowledge of the water usage of the plant. But one of these sensors is definitely like the best option as far as tracking how much water that the plant demands and not overusing. But that
Mhm.
may take, there's the installation, I think of like with the robot mowers having to have the wires around your property. If you have to have some sort of wire that goes out to a sensor, or it's out in the middle of the lawn or something like that, if it's not buried, that could potentially get in the way. Also, the calibration of the sensor, if something happens that, you turn off the water or you forget to turn it on and the calibration gets out of whack, that you either need to recalibrate it, and then it could, set off further problems of not watering or overwatering to try to keep up with what the sensor is saying. Um, but in general, it's it's unmatched of how good you can dial them in. And especially like you were saying, Ryan, with the microclimates on golf courses. If you could even dial in the microclimates that you have at your own house,
Yeah,
then
think
you could
about your
save
front
even
yard, your
more
backyard,
water.
Evie.
Yep.
Yeah, I was just thinking about that. Where my what I do when possible when dealing with an irrigation system is I pay attention to the difference between, say, a shadier area versus an area that gets full sun and more exposure to air movement, because I know for myself that, for example, the area that's shaded and not getting as much sun is going to lose less water per week. And yet, what I find when I walk into somebody's irrigation controller is that the sunny areas have been set exactly the same as the shady areas. And in the meantime, of course, the grass is literally suffering from too much water. I mean, to me, you know what? My ideal soil sensing system would be controlling each zone individually to where each valve is controlled by a sensor, where the sensor is plugged into the ground in that area that zone is covering. And then, so for example, if it's shady and not losing a lot of water and the soil stays wet, hey, irrigation doesn't switch on there, every couple of days for 10 minutes. It's just no water there. And then, of course, the area out by the street that has all the heat reflected off of the asphalt, you damned well better be watering that, or else you're going to have crispy grass. And crispy grass is never a good thing.
Right, and I think there's two other parts of that are really crucial. Number one is that the irrigation layout is correct, right, in being able to meet those demands, right, which is somewhat of a challenge sometimes. So you have the best sensor, but if you have poorly laid out irrigation, right, it could come back to bite you.
Lousy.
And the last thing is, and as Telly so eloquently pointed out here, that coverage can be a concern, right, in certain areas that we have better coverage or poorer coverage, right. And in that sense, I think the thing that people need to realize too, even on a golf course, right, even with irrigation systems that cover hundreds of acres and literally cost easily just to walk in the door million, four,
a couple million,
something like that,
a couple million,
we still hand water. We still hand water because there's only a finite point to which that irrigation system can be correct. So even if you can set it and forget it, be fine, resign yourself to that fate. But there are reasons that they're coming after lawns in Colorado, in the Colorado River Basin, and everything like that right now, because people don't know how to do this, and we've entrusted people with too much responsibility now because water's at a premium in many of these areas, and now we're left to deal with this. So hopefully the soil moisture sensors will get a much better look. Maybe we'll do a little bit of a deep dive on those here as we go through the wintertime. We use them quite a bit on the sports field side, specifically for the reasons stated, and some other ones too. So it's an interesting topic. But gentlemen, that is all of our returns tonight. And in closing here, I just want to remark a little bit first and say thank you to Evie. Again, always appreciate having somebody who's so thoughtful, well-spoken, and just good-looking. I mean, the guy puts us to shame. Hopefully Sheila doesn't watch this episode. She'll probably fly right over to Minnesota, Ray, and, well,
You know what? She's going to have to get through Mrs. Evie first, because
it's true.
Here's the thing.
It's true.
I'm going to put this out there. Mrs. Evie is a looker. Okay? So Sheila ain't got nothing on Mrs. Evie, all right? There, I said it.
Well, I don't know if there was a reverse for hot wife porn, but I think Ray just stepped into it right there. He's the hot Hawaiian porn. So if you're into that kind of thing, check it out. Ray will set you up on his OnlyFans too. With that, gentlemen, we've got our next recording for Burner Return will be on Sunday, December 4th. We're off next weekend for holiday, so happy Thanksgiving to all of you. We'll entertain that here in just a moment. And secondly, this let's see here, next Thursday, December the 1st, we're here live with Joey Poa, the Lawn Warrior, one of our favorites. I'm sure it'll be a candid and uplifting conversation, there's no doubt. But last things last is happy Thanksgiving to all of you. If you're listening to this and you're getting away from family while you're visiting and you needed a minute just to cheer up, that's right, needed a minute to cheer up, or you're traveling and listening to us do this, thank you so much for listening. Thank you for following along with all of our crazy antics, our bullshit, and maybe even co-signing a little bit of that bullshit too. We love you, and we'll see you all on the next one.